Indonesia, officially the Republic of Indonesia, is a country in Southeast Asia and Oceania, between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. It consists of more than 17,000 islands, including Sumatra, Java, Borneo, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and New Guinea, Papua. Indonesia is the world's largest island country and the 14th largest country by land area, with over a million people. It is the world's fourth most populous country as well as the most populous Muslim majority country. Java, the world's most populous island, is home to more than half of the country's population. The sovereign state is a presidential, constitutional republic with an elected legislature. It has 34 provinces, of which 5 have special status. The country's capital, Jakarta, is the second most populous urban area in the world. The country shares land borders with Papua New Guinea, East Timor, and the eastern part of Malaysia. Other neighboring countries include Singapore, Vietnam, the Philippines, Australia, Palau, and India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Despite its large population and densely populated regions, Indonesia has vast areas of wilderness that support one of the world's highest levels of biodiversity. The Indonesian archipelago has been a valuable region for trade since at least the 7th century, when Srivijaya and later Majapahit traded with entities from mainland China and the Indian subcontinent. Local rulers gradually absorbed foreign influences from the early centuries and Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms flourished. Sunni traders and Sufi scholars brought Islam, while Europeans introduced Christianity through colonization, although sometimes interrupted by the Portuguese, French, and British. The Dutch were the foremost colonial power for much of their 350-year presence in the archipelago. The concept of Indonesia as a nation-state emerged in the early 20th century and the country proclaimed its independence in 1945. However, it was not until 1949 that the Dutch recognized Indonesia's sovereignty following an armed and diplomatic conflict between the two. Indonesia consists of hundreds of distinct native ethnic and linguistic groups, with the largest one being the Javanese. A shared identity has developed with the motto Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity, literally, many, yet one, defined by a national language, ethnic diversity, religious pluralism within a Muslim majority population, and a history of colonialism and rebellion against it. The economy of Indonesia is the world's 16th largest by nominal GDP and 7th by GDP at PPP. The country is a member of several multilateral organizations, including the United Nations, World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, G20, and a founding member of Non-Aligned Movement, Association of Southeast Asian
commerciava con la
Nations,
Cina e
Asia
l'India.
Pacific
I sovrani
Economic
locali
Cooperation,
adottarono
East Asia
gradualmente
Summit,
dall'India
Asian
il modello
Infrastructure
culturale,
Investment
religioso e
Bank, and
politico
Organization
fin
of
dai primi
Islamic
secoli
Cooperation.
d.C., con la
Etymology.
The
fioritura di
name
regni indù
Indonesia
e
derives from
buddisti.
Greek
La
and the
storia
word, meaning Indian Islands. The
43,
name dates to the 18th century,
919
far
secolo.
predating the
L'eruzione del
formation of
supervulcano
independent
Toba,
Indonesia.
circa
In
anni fa, fu una delle
1850,
più grandi
George
eruzioni
Windsor
mai
Earl, an
verificatesi,
English
e una
ethnologist,
catastrofe globale.
proposed the
Fra le
terms
calamità che hanno
Indonesians
colpito il
and,
paese
his
nei primi anni
preference,
del XXI secolo si
Malayunisans,
segnala lo
for the inhabitants of the
pianeta,
Indian
che
archipelago or
in
Malayan
Malta.
archipelago.
È
In the
situata
same
sull'isola di
publication,
Giava ed è la
one of
più
his
grande
students,
città dello
James
Stato.
Richardson
La
Logan,
seguono
used
Surabaya,
Indonesia as a
Bandung,
synonym
Medan
for
e
Indian
Semarang. Con una
archipelago.
superficie
However, Dutch
dell'Indonesia è il
academics writing in
16°
East
paese del
Indies
mondo per
publications were
estensione. La
reluctant to
sua
use
densità
Indonesia.
media è di
They preferred Malay
134 persone
archipelago,
per
the
chilometro
Netherlands
quadrato,
East Indies,
79esima nel
popularly,
mondo,
the East,
anche se
and,
sull'isola di
after
Giava, la più
1900,
popolosa
Indonesia became
dell'arcipelago,
more
si
common in
toccano le
academic circles
940
outside the
persone per
Netherlands,
chilometro
and
quadrato,
native
con sul
nationalist
livello
groups
del mare.
adopted it for
Punta
political
Chiaia
expression.
sull'isola di Nuova
Homo
Guinea è la più
sapiens
alta
reached the
montagna
region
del
around
paese e dell'intero
43,000
continente
BCE.
dell'Oceania, a cui l'isola
Austronesian peoples, who
geograficamente
formed the
appartiene,
majority
e il
of the
lago
modern
Toba a Sumatra è
population,
il lago più
migrated to
grande con una
Southeast Asia
superficie
from
di.
what
I
is now
fiumi più lunghi
Taiwan.
sono nel
They
Kalimantan,
arrived in the
parte
archipelago
indonesiana
around
dell'isola del
2000
Borneo,
BCE
e
and confined
comprendono
the
il
native
Macao, il
Melanesian
Barito e
peoples
il
to the Far
Capuas.
Eastern regions
L'Indonesia
as
è
they spread
posizionata
east.
sul bordo di
Ideal
importanti
agricultural
faglie
conditions and the
tettoniche, quali
mastering
la
of wet
placca
field rice
pacifica,
cultivation as
eurasiatica e
early as the 8th
australiana che rendono
century
la
BCE
regione
allowed villages, towns, and small kingdoms to flourish by the 1st century CE. The archipelago's strategic sea lane position fostered inter-island and international trade, including with Indian kingdoms and Chinese dynasties. From several centuries BCE, trade has since fundamentally shaped Indonesian history. From the 7th century CE, the Srivijaya naval kingdom flourished as a result of trade and the influences of Hinduism and Buddhism. Between the 8th and 10th centuries CE, the agricultural Buddhist Sailendra and Hindu Mataram dynasties thrived and declined in inland Java, leaving grand religious monuments such as Sailendra's Borobudur and Mataram's Prambanan. The Hindu Majapahit kingdom was founded in eastern Java in the late 13th century, and under Gajah Mada, its influence stretched over much of present-day Indonesia. This period is often referred to as a golden age in Indonesian history. The earliest evidence of Islamized populations in the archipelago dates to the 13th century in northern Sumatra. Other parts of the archipelago gradually adopted Islam, and it was the dominant religion in Java and Sumatra by the end of the 16th century. For the most part, Islam overlaid and mixed with existing cultural and religious influences, which shaped the predominant form of Islam in Indonesia, particularly in Java.
Colonial era.
The first Europeans arrived in the archipelago in 1512, when Portuguese traders, led by Francisco Serrao, sought to monopolize the sources of nutmeg, cloves, and cubeb pepper in the Maluku Islands. Dutch and British traders followed. In 1602, the Dutch established the Dutch East India Company VOC and became the dominant European power for almost 200 years. The VOC was dissolved in 1800 following bankruptcy, and the Netherlands established the Dutch East Indies as a nationalized colony. For most of the colonial period, Dutch control over the archipelago was tenuous. Dutch forces were engaged continuously in quelling rebellions both on and off Java. The influence of local leaders such as Prince Diponegoro in central Java, Imam Bonjol in central Sumatra, Patimura in Maluku, and bloody 30-year war in Aceh weakened the Dutch and tied up the colonial military forces. Only in the early 20th century did their dominance extend to what was to become Indonesia's current boundaries. The Japanese invasion and subsequent occupation during World War II ended Dutch rule and encouraged the previously suppressed independence movement. 2 days after the surrender of Japan in August 1945, Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta, influential nationalist leaders, proclaimed Indonesian independence and were appointed president and vice president respectively. The Netherlands attempted to re-establish their rule, and a bitter armed and diplomatic struggle ended in December 1949 when the Dutch formally recognized Indonesian independence in the face of international pressure. Despite extraordinary political, social and sectarian divisions, Indonesians, on the whole, found unity in their fight for independence.
Modern era.
As president, Sukarno moved Indonesia from democracy towards authoritarianism and maintained power by balancing the opposing forces of the military, political Islam, and the increasingly powerful Communist Party of Indonesia (PKI). Tensions between the military and the PKI culminated in an attempted coup in 1965. The army, led by Major General Suharto, countered by instigating a violent anti-communist purge that killed between 500,000 and 1 million people. The PKI was blamed for the coup and effectively destroyed. Suharto capitalized on Sukarno's weakened position, and following a drawn-out power play with Sukarno, Suharto was appointed president in March 1968. His New Order administration, supported by the United States, encouraged foreign direct investment, which was a crucial factor in the subsequent 3 decades of substantial economic growth. Indonesia was the country hardest hit by the 1997 Asian financial crisis. It brought out popular discontent with the New Order's corruption and suppression of political opposition and ultimately ended Suharto's presidency. In 1999, East Timor seceded from Indonesia, following its 1975 invasion by Indonesia and a 25-year occupation that was marked by international condemnation of human rights abuses. In the post-Suharto era, Democratic processes have been strengthened by enhancing regional autonomy and instituting the country's first direct presidential election in 2004. Political, economic and social instability, corruption, and terrorism remained problems in the 2000s. However, in recent years, the economy has performed strongly, although relations among the diverse population are mostly harmonious. Acute sectarian discontent and violence remain a problem in some areas. A political settlement to an armed separatist conflict in Nusa was achieved in 2005 following the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami that killed 130,000 Indonesians. In 2014, Joko Widodo became the first directly elected president from outside the military and political elite.
Geography.
Indonesia lies between latitudes 11 degrees south and 6 degrees north, and longitudes 95 degrees east and 141 degrees east. It is the largest archipelagic country in the world, extending from east to west and from north to south. According to the country's coordinating Ministry for Maritime and Investments Affairs, Indonesia has 17,504 islands, 16,056 of which are registered at the UN, scattered over both sides of the equator, around 6,000 of which are inhabited. The largest are Java, Sumatra, Borneo shared with Brunei and Malaysia, Sulawesi, and New Guinea shared with Papua New Guinea. Indonesia shares land borders with Malaysia on Borneo and Sebatik, Papua New Guinea on the island of New Guinea, and East Timor on the island of Timor, and maritime borders with Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Palau, and Australia. At Puncak Jaya is Indonesia's highest peak, and Lake Toba in Sumatra is the largest lake, with an area of 1,145 square kilometers 442 square miles. Indonesia's largest rivers are in Kalimantan and New Guinea and include Kapuas, Barito, Mombramo, Sepik, and Mahakam. They serve as communication and transport links between the island's river settlements.
Climate.
Indonesia lies along the equator, and its climate tends to be relatively even year-round. Indonesia has two seasons, a wet season and a dry season, with no extremes of summer or winter. For most of Indonesia, the dry season falls between May and October with the wet season between November and April.
Geology.
Tectonically, Indonesia is highly unstable, making it a site of numerous volcanoes and frequent earthquakes. Between 1972 and 1991, there were 29 volcanic eruptions, mostly on Java. Volcanic ash has made agricultural conditions unpredictable in some areas. However, it has also resulted in fertile soils, a factor in historically sustaining high population densities of Java and Bali. A massive supervolcano erupted at present-day Lake Toba around 70,000 BCE. It is believed to have caused a global volcanic winter and cooling of the climate, and subsequently led to a genetic bottleneck in human evolution, though this is still in debate. The 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora and the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa were among the largest in recorded history. The former caused 92,000 deaths and created an umbrella of volcanic ash which spread and blanketed parts of the archipelago, and made much of the northern hemisphere without summer in 1816. The latter produced the loudest sound in recorded history and caused 36,000 deaths due to the eruption itself and the resulting tsunamis, with significant additional effects around the world years after the event. Recent catastrophic disasters due to seismic activity include the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and the 2006 Yogyakarta earthquake.
Biodiversity.
Indonesia's size, tropical climate, and archipelagic geography support one of the world's highest levels of biodiversity. Its flora and fauna is a mixture of Asian and Australasian species. The islands of the Sunda Shelf, Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and Bali were once linked to mainland Asia, and have a wealth of Asian fauna. Large species such as the Sumatran tiger, rhinoceros, orangutan, Asian elephant, and leopard were once abundant as far east as Bali, but numbers and distribution have dwindled drastically, having been long separated from the continental landmasses. Sulawesi, Nusa Tenggara, and Maluku have developed their unique flora and fauna. Papua was part of the Australian landmass and is home to a unique fauna and flora closely related to that of Australia, including over 600 bird species. Forests cover approximately 70% of the country. However, the forests of the smaller, and more densely populated Java, have largely been removed for human habitation and agriculture. Indonesia is second only to Australia in terms of total endemic species, with 36% of its 1,531 species of bird and 39% of its 515 species of mammal being endemic. Tropical seas surround Indonesia's of coastline. The country has a range of sea and coastal ecosystems, including beaches, dunes, estuaries, mangroves, coral reefs, seagrass beds, coastal mudflats, tidal flats, algal beds, and small island ecosystems. British naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace described a dividing Wallace line between the distribution of Indonesia's Asian and Australasian species. It runs roughly north-south along the edge of the Sunda Shelf, between Kalimantan and Sulawesi, and along the deep Lombok Strait, between Lombok and Bali. Flora and fauna on the west of the line are generally Asian, while east from Lombok they are increasingly Australian until the tipping point at the Weber Line. In his 1869 book, The Malay Archipelago, Wallace described numerous species unique to the area. The region of islands between his line and New Guinea is now termed Wallacea. Problems include the destruction of peatlands, large-scale illegal deforestation, and the resulting Southeast Asian haze, overexploitation of marine resources, air pollution, garbage management, and reliable water and wastewater services. Expansion of the palm oil industry requiring significant changes to the natural ecosystems is the one primary factor behind much of Indonesia's deforestation. While it can generate wealth for local communities, it may degrade ecosystems and cause social problems. This situation makes Indonesia the world's largest forest-based emitter of greenhouse gases. It also threatens the survival of indigenous and endemic species. The International Union for Conservation of Nature (IUCN) identified 140 species of mammals as threatened, and 15 as critically endangered, including the Bali starling, Sumatran orangutan, and Javan rhinoceros. Several studies consider Indonesia to be at severe risk from the projected effects of climate change. They predict that unreduced emissions would see an average temperature rise of around by mid-century, amounting to almost double the frequency of scorching days above per year by 2030. That figure is predicted to rise further by the end of the century. A majority of Indonesia's population lives in low-lying coastal areas. Impoverished communities would likely be affected the most by climate change.
Government and politics.
Indonesia is a republic with a presidential system. Following the fall of the new order in 1998, political and governmental structures have undergone sweeping reforms, with 4 constitutional amendments revamping the executive, legislative and judicial branches. Chief among them is the delegation of power and authority to various regional entities while remaining a unitary state. The President of Indonesia is the head of state and head of government, Commander-in-Chief of the Indonesian National Armed Forces Tentara Nasional Indonesia, TNI, and the Director of Domestic Governance, Policymaking, and Foreign Affairs. The President may serve a maximum of 2 consecutive 5-year terms. The highest representative body at the national level is the People's Consultative Assembly Majelis Permusyawaratan Rakyat, MPR. Its main functions are supporting and amending the Constitution, inaugurating and impeaching the President, and formalizing broad outlines of state policy. The MPR comprises 2 houses: the People's Representative Council Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat, DPR, with 575 members, and the Regional Representative Council Dewan Perwakilan Daerah, DPD, with 136. The DPR passes legislation and monitors the executive branch. Reforms since 1998 have markedly increased its role in national governance. Additionally, the Judicial Commission (EU) monitors the performance of judges.
Parties and elections.
Since 1999, Indonesia has had a multi-party system. In all legislative elections since the fall of the new order, no political party has managed to win an overall majority of seats. The Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle (PDIP), which secured the most votes in the 2019 elections, is the party of the incumbent president, Joko Widodo. Other notable parties include the party of the functional group Golkar, the Great Indonesia Movement Party Gerindra, the Democratic Party, and the Prosperous Justice Party (PKS). The 2019 elections resulted in 9 political parties in the DPR, with a parliamentary threshold of 4% of the national vote. The first general election was held in 1955 to elect members of the DPR and the Constitutional Assembly Constituante. At the national level, Indonesians did not elect a president until 2004. Since then, the president is elected for a 5-year term, as are the party-aligned members of the DPR and the non-partisan DPD.
Administrative divisions.
Indonesia has several levels of subdivisions. The first level is that of the provinces, with 5 out of a total of 34 having a special status. Each has a legislature Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat Daerah, DPRD, and an elected governor. This number has evolved, with the most recent change being the split of North Kalimantan from East Kalimantan in 2012. The second level is that of the regencies Kabupaten and cities Kota, led by Regents Bupati and Mayors Wali Kota respectively, and a legislature DPRD Kabupaten, Kota. The third level is that of the districts Kecamatan, district in Papua, or Kapanwan and Kementerian in Yogyakarta, and the fourth is of the villages either Desa, Kelaruan, Kampung, Nagari in West Sumatra, or Gampong in Aceh. The village is the lowest level of government administration. It is divided into several community groups Fukan Warga, RW, which are further divided into neighborhood groups Fukan Tetangga, RT. In Java, the village Disu is divided into smaller units called Dusun or Duku hamlets, which are the same as RW. Following the implementation of regional autonomy measures in 2001, regencies and cities have become chief administrative units, responsible for providing most government services. The village administration level is the most influential on a citizen's daily life and handles matters of a village or neighborhood through an elected village headlera or Kepala Desa. Aceh, Jakarta, Yogyakarta, Papua, and West Papua have greater legislative privileges and a higher degree of autonomy from the central government than the other provinces. A conservative Islamic territory, Aceh has the right to create some aspects of an independent legal system implementing Sharia. Yogyakarta is the only pre-colonial monarchy legally recognized in Indonesia, with the positions of governor and vice-governor being prioritized for descendants of the Sultan of Yogyakarta and Pakualam, respectively. Papua and West Papua are the only provinces where the indigenous people have privileges in their local government. Jakarta is the only city granted a provincial government due to its position as the capital of Indonesia.
Foreign relations.
Indonesia maintains 132 diplomatic missions abroad, including 95 embassies. The country adheres to what it calls a free and active foreign policy, seeking a role in regional affairs in proportion to its size and location but avoiding involvement in conflicts among other countries. Indonesia was a significant battleground during the Cold War. Numerous attempts by the United States and the Soviet Union, and China to some degree, culminated in the 1965 coup attempt and subsequent upheaval that led to a reorientation of foreign policy. Quiet alignment with the West while maintaining a non-aligned stance has characterized Indonesia's foreign policy since then. Today, it maintains close relations with its neighbors and is a founding member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN) and the East Asia Summit. In common with most of the Muslim world, Indonesia does not have diplomatic relations with Israel and has actively supported Palestine. However, Observers have pointed out that Indonesia has ties with Israel, albeit discreetly. Indonesia has been a member of the United Nations since 1950 and was a founding member of the Non-Aligned Movement NAM and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation (OIC). Indonesia is a signatory to the ASEAN Free Trade Area Agreement, the CANS Group, and the World Trade Organization WTO, and an occasional member of OPEC. During the Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation, Indonesia withdrew from the UN due to the latter's election to the United Nations Security Council, although it returned 18 months later. It marked the first time in UN history that a member state had attempted a withdrawal. Indonesia has been a humanitarian and development aid recipient since 1966, and recently, the country has expressed interest in becoming an aid donor.
Military.
Indonesia's armed forces TNI include the Army TNI AD, Navy TNI AL, which includes Marine Corps, and Air Force TNI A.U. The Army has about 400,000 active duty personnel. Defense spending in the national budget was 0.7% of GDP in 2018, with controversial involvement of military-owned commercial interests and foundations. The armed forces were formed during the Indonesian National Revolution when it undertook guerrilla warfare along with informal militia. Since then, territorial lines have formed the basis of all TNI branches' structure, aimed at maintaining domestic stability and deterring foreign threats. The military has possessed a strong political influence since its founding, which peaked during the New Order. Political reforms in 1998 included the removal of the TNI's formal representation from the legislature. Nevertheless, its political influence remains, albeit at a reduced level. Since independence, the country has struggled to maintain unity against local insurgencies and separatist movements. Some, notably in Aceh and Papua, have led to an armed conflict, and subsequent allegations of human rights abuses and brutality from all sides. The former was resolved peacefully in 2005. Other engagements of the army include the campaign against the Netherlands' New Guinea to incorporate the territory into Indonesia, the confrontacy to oppose the creation of Malaysia, the mass killings of PKI, and the invasion of East Timor, which remains Indonesia's most massive military operation.
Economy.
Indonesia has a mixed economy in which both the private sector and government play vital roles. As the only G20 member state in Southeast Asia, the country has the largest economy in the region and is classified as a newly industrialized country. It is the world's 16th largest economy by nominal GDP and 7th in terms of GDP at PPP, estimated to be $100 trillion and $3 740 trillion respectively. Per capita GDP in PPP is $14,020, while nominal per capita GDP is $4,120. The debt ratio to GDP is 29.2%. The services are the economy's largest sector and account for 43.4% of GDP 2018, followed by industry 39.7% and agriculture 12.8%. Since 2009, it has employed more people than other sectors, accounting for 47.7% of the total labor force, followed by agriculture 30.2% and industry 21.9%. Over time, the structure of the economy has changed considerably. Historically, it has been weighted heavily towards agriculture, reflecting both its stage of economic development and government policies in the 1950s and 1960s to promote agricultural self-sufficiency. Reduction of trade barriers from the mid-1980s made the economy more globally integrated. The growth, however, ended with the 1997 Asian financial crisis, which affected the economy severely. It caused a real GDP contraction by 13.1% in 1998, and inflation reached 78%. The economy reached its low point in mid-1999 with only 0.8% real GDP growth. Relatively steady inflation and an increase in GDP deflator and the consumer price index have contributed to strong economic growth in recent years. Since 2007, annual growth has accelerated to between 4% and 6% as a result of improvement in the banking sector and domestic consumption, helping Indonesia weather the 2008 to 2009 Great Recession. In 2011, the country regained the investment grade rating it had lost in 1997. 41% of the population lived below the poverty line, and the official open unemployment rate was 5.28%. Indonesia has abundant natural resources like oil and natural gas, coal, tin, copper, gold, and nickel, while agriculture produces rice, palm oil, tea, coffee, cacao, medicinal plants, spices, and rubber. These commodities make up a large portion of the country's exports, with palm oil and coal briquettes as the leading export commodities. In addition to refined and crude petroleum as the main imports, telephones, vehicle parts and wheat cover the majority of additional imports. China, the United States, Japan, Singapore, India, Malaysia, South Korea and Thailand are Indonesia's principal export markets and import partners.
Transport.
Indonesia's transport system has been shaped over time by the economic resource base of an archipelago, and the distribution of its 250 million people highly concentrated on Java. All transport modes play a role in the country's transport system and are generally complementary rather than competitive. In 2016, the transport sector generated about 5.2% of GDP. The road transport system is predominant, with a total length of. Jakarta has the most extended bus rapid transit system in the world, boasting some in 13 corridors and 10 cross-corridor routes. Rickshaws such as Bajaj and Biak and share taxis such as Angkot and Metro Mini are a regular sight in the country. Most of the railways are in Java, used for both freight and passenger transport, such as local commuter rail services complementing the intercity rail network in several cities. In the late 2010s, Jakarta and Palembang were the first cities in Indonesia to have rapid transit systems, with more planned for other cities in the future. In 2015, the government announced a plan to build a high-speed rail, which would be a first in Southeast Asia. Indonesia's largest airport, Soekarno-Hatta International Airport, is the busiest in the southern hemisphere, serving 66 million passengers in 2018. Ngurah International Airport and Juanda International Airport are the country's second and third busiest airport respectively. Garuda Indonesia, the country's flag carrier since 1949, is one of the world's leading airlines and a member of the global airline alliance SkyTeam. Port of Tanjung Priok is the busiest and most advanced Indonesian port, handling more than 50% of Indonesia's transshipment cargo traffic.
Energy.
In 2017, Indonesia was the world's 9th largest energy producer and the 15th largest energy consumer with. The country has substantial energy resources, including of conventional oil and gas reserves of which about 4 billion barrels are recoverable, 8 billion barrels of oil equivalent of coal-based methane CBM resources, and 28 billion tons of recoverable coal. While reliance on domestic coal and imported oil has increased, Indonesia has set out to achieve 23% use of renewable energy by 2025 and 31% by 2050. Indonesia's total national installed power generation capacity stands at 55,528. 51 megawatts. The country's largest dam, Jatilha, has several purposes including the provision of hydroelectric power generation, water supply, flood control, irrigation and aquaculture. The earth-filled dam is high and withholds a reservoir of. It helps to supply water to Jakarta and to irrigate of rice fields and has an installed capacity of 186. 5 megawatts which feeds into the Java grid managed by the state electricity company Perusahaan Listrik Negara, PLN.
Science and technology.
Indonesia's expenditure on science and technology is relatively low, at less than 0.1% of GDP 2017. Historical examples of scientific and technological developments include the paddy cultivation technique terracering, which is common in Southeast Asia, and the Pinasai boats by the Bugis and Makassar people. In the 1980s, Indonesian engineer Joko Daraka Sukuwati invented a road construction technique named Sosrabaya that allows the construction of long stretches of flyovers above existing main roads with minimum traffic disruption. It later became widely used in several countries. The country is also an active producer of passenger trains and freight wagons with its state-owned company, the Indonesian Railway Industry Inca, and has exported trains abroad. Indonesia has a long history in developing military and small commuter aircraft as the only country in Southeast Asia to build and produce aircraft. With its state-owned company, the Indonesian Aerospace PT. Dirgantara Indonesia, Indonesia has provided components for Boeing and Airbus. The company also collaborated with the ADS CASA of Spain to develop the CN-235 that has seen use by several countries. Former President B.J. Habibie played a vital role in this achievement. Indonesia has also joined the South Korean program to manufacture the fifth-generation jet fighter KKFX. Indonesia has a space program and space agency, the National Institute of Aeronautics and Space Lembaga Penerbangan dan Antariksa Nasional, LAPAN. In the 1970s, Indonesia became the first developing country to operate a satellite system called Palangka, a series of communication satellites owned by Indosat Ooredoo. The first satellite, Palangka A1, was launched on the 8th of July 1976 from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, United States. Indonesia has launched 18 satellites for various purposes, and LAPAN has expressed a desire to put satellites in orbit with native launch vehicles by 2040. Tourism contributed around $19.7 billion to GDP in 2019. In 2018, Indonesia received 15.8 million visitors, a growth of 12.5% from last year, and received an average receipt of $967. China, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, and Japan are the top 5 sources of visitors to Indonesia. Since 2011, Wonderful Indonesia has been the slogan of the country's international marketing campaign to promote tourism. Nature and culture are prime attractions of Indonesian tourism. The former can boast a unique combination of a tropical climate, a vast archipelago, and a long stretch of beaches, and the latter complement those with a rich cultural heritage reflecting Indonesia's dynamic history and ethnic diversity. Indonesia has a well-preserved natural ecosystem with rainforests that stretch over about 57% of Indonesia's land, 225 million acres. Forests on Sumatra and Kalimantan are examples of popular destinations, such as the Orangutan Wildlife Reserve. Moreover, Indonesia has one of the world's longest coastlines, measuring. The ancient Borobudur and Prambanan temples as well as Tirana and Bali, with its traditional festivities, are some of the popular destinations for cultural tourism. Indonesia has 9 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, including the Komodo National Park and the Sawulanto coal mine, and a further 19 in a tentative list that includes Bunaken National Park and Raja Ampat Islands. Other attractions include the specific points in Indonesian history, such as the colonial heritage of the Dutch East Indies in the old towns of Jakarta and Semarang, and the royal palaces of Pagaruyung, Ubud, and Yogyakarta. Java is the world's most populous island, where 58% of the country's population lives. The population density is 138 people per square kilometre, 357 per square mile, ranking 88th in the world, although Java has a population density of 1,067 people per square kilometre, 2,435 per square mile. In 1961, the first post-colonial census recorded a total of 97 million people. It is expected to grow to around 295 million by 2030 and 321 million by 2050. The country currently possesses a relatively young population, with a median age of 32 years. 2017 estimate. As of 2017, about 54.7% of the population lives in urban areas. Jakarta is the country's primate city and the second most populous urban area in the world with over 34 million residents. About 8 million Indonesians live overseas, most settled in Malaysia, the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Hong Kong, Singapore, the United States, and Australia.
Ethnic groups and languages.
Indonesia is an ethnically diverse country, with around 300 distinct native ethnic groups. Most Indonesians are descended from Austronesian peoples whose languages had origins in Proto-Austronesian, which possibly originated in what is now Taiwan. Another major grouping is the Melanesians, who inhabit eastern Indonesia, the Maluku Islands and western New Guinea. The Javanese are the largest ethnic group, constituting 42% of the population. They are predominantly located in the central to eastern parts of Java and also sizable numbers in most provinces. The Sundanese, Malay, Batak, Madjis, Minangkabau and Buginese are the next largest groups in the country. A sense of Indonesian nationhood exists alongside strong regional identities. The country's official language is Indonesian, a variant of Malay based on its prestige dialect, which for centuries had been the lingua franca of the archipelago. It was promoted by nationalists in the 1920s and achieved official status under the name Bahasa Indonesia in 1945. As a result of centuries-long contact with other languages, it is rich in local and foreign influences, including from Javanese, Sundanese, Minangkabau, Hindi, Sanskrit, Chinese, Arabic, Dutch, Portuguese, and English. Nearly every Indonesian speaks the language due to its widespread use in education, academics, communications, business, politics, and mass media. Most Indonesians also speak at least one of more than 700 local languages, often as their first language. Most belong to the Austronesian language family, while there are over 270 Papuan languages spoken in eastern Indonesia. Historically, they constituted only a tiny fraction of the native population and continue to do so today, despite the Dutch presence for almost 350 years. The Dutch language never had a substantial number of speakers or official status. The small minorities that can speak it or Dutch-based Creole languages fluently are the aforementioned ethnic groups and descendants of Dutch colonizers. Today, there is some degree of fluency by either educated members of the oldest generation or legal professionals, as specific law codes are still only available in Dutch.
Religion.
While the Constitution stipulates religious freedom, with indigenous religions only partly acknowledged, the Shias and Ahmadis respectively constitute 1% 1 to 3 million and 0.2% 200,000 to 400,000 of the Muslim population. Almost 11% of Indonesians are Christians, while the rest are Hindus, Buddhists, and others. Most Hindus are Balinese, and most Buddhists are Chinese Indonesians. The natives of the Indonesian archipelago originally practiced indigenous animism and dynamism, beliefs that are common to Austronesian people. Examples of Indonesian native belief systems include the Sundanese Sunda Wiwitan, Dayaks Kaharingan, and the Javanese Kijayan. They have had a significant impact on how other faiths are practiced, evidenced by a large proportion of people, such as the Javanese Abangan, Balinese Hindus, and Dayak Christians, practicing a less orthodox, syncretic form of their religion. Hindu influences reached the archipelago as early as the 1st century CE. The Sundanese kingdom of Salakanagara in western Java around 130 was the first historically recorded Indianized kingdom in the archipelago. Buddhism arrived around the 6th century, and its history in Indonesia is closely related to that of Hinduism, as some empires based on Buddhism had its roots around the same period. The archipelago has witnessed the rise and fall of powerful and influential Hindu and Buddhist empires such as Majapahit, Sailendra, Srivijaya, and Mataram. Though no longer a majority, Hinduism and Buddhism remain defining influences in Indonesian culture. Islam was introduced by Sunni traders of the Shafi fiqh, as well as Sufi traders from the Indian subcontinent and southern Arabian Peninsula as early as the 8th century CE. For the most part, Islam overlaid and mixed with existing cultural and religious influences that resulted in a distinct form of Islam. Trade, missionary works such as by the Wale Sanggu and Chinese explorer Zheng He, and military campaigns by several sultanates helped accelerate the spread of the religion. By the end of the 16th century, Islam had supplanted Hinduism and Buddhism as the dominant religion of Java and Sumatra. Catholicism was brought by Portuguese traders and missionaries such as Jesuit Francis Xavier, who visited and baptized several thousand locals. Its spread faced difficulty due to the VOC policy of banning the religion and the Dutch hostility due to the 80 Years' War against Catholic Spain's rule. Protestantism is mostly a result of Calvinist and Lutheran missionary efforts during the Dutch colonial era. Although they are the most common branch, there is a multitude of other denominations elsewhere in the country. There was a sizable Jewish presence in the archipelago until 1945, mostly Dutch and some Baghdadi Jews. Since most have left after Indonesia proclaimed independence, Judaism was never accorded official status, and only a tiny number of Jews remain today, mostly in Jakarta and Surabaya. At the national and local level, Indonesia's political leadership and civil society groups have played a crucial role in interfaith relations, both positively and negatively. The invocation of the first principle of Indonesia's philosophical foundation, Pancasila, the belief in the one and only God, often serves as a reminder of religious tolerance. Though instances of intolerance have occurred, an overwhelming majority of Indonesians consider religion to be essential, and its role is present in almost all aspects of society, including politics, education, marriage, and public holidays.
Education and health.
Education is compulsory for 12 years. Parents can choose between state-run, non-sectarian schools or private or semi-private religious, usually Islamic schools, supervised by the Ministries of Education and Religion, respectively. Private international schools that do not follow the national curriculum are also available. The enrollment rate is 93% for primary education, 79% for secondary education, and 36% for tertiary education 2018. The literacy rate is 96% 2018, and the government spends about 3.6% of GDP 2015 on education. The top universities are the Java-based University of Indonesia, Bandung Institute of Technology and Gadjah Mada University. Government expenditure on healthcare is about 3% of GDP in 2016. As part of an attempt to achieve universal healthcare, the government launched the National Health Insurance Jaminan Kesehatan Nasional (JKN) in 2014 that provides healthcare to citizens. They include coverage for a range of services from the public and also private firms that have opted to join the scheme. In recent decades, there have been remarkable improvements such as rising life expectancy from 62.3 years in 1990 to 71.7 years in 2019, and declining child mortality from 84 deaths per 1,000 births in 1990 to 25.4 deaths in 2017. Nevertheless, Indonesia continues to face challenges that include maternal and child health, low air quality, malnutrition, high rate of smoking, and infectious diseases.
Issues.
Nearly 80% of Indonesia's population lives in the western parts of the archipelago, but they are growing at a slower pace than the rest of the country. This situation creates a gap in wealth, unemployment rate, and health between densely populated islands and economic centers such as Sumatra and Java and sparsely populated, disadvantaged areas such as Maluku and Papua. Racism, especially against Chinese Indonesians since the colonial period, is still prevalent today. There has been a marked increase of religious intolerance since 1998, with the most recent high-profile case being that of Chinese Christian former governor of Jakarta, Basuki Cahayapurnama. LGBT issues have recently gained attention in Indonesia. While homosexuality is legal in most parts of the country, it is illegal in Aceh and South Sumatra. LGBT people and activists have regularly faced fierce opposition, intimidation, and discrimination, launched even by authorities.
Culture.
The cultural history of the Indonesian archipelago spans more than 2 millennia. Influences from the Indian subcontinent, mainland China, the Middle East, Europe, and the Austronesian peoples have historically shaped the cultural, linguistic and religious makeup of the archipelago. As a result, modern-day Indonesia has a multicultural, multilingual and multi-ethnic society, Pencaksilat, Angklung, and the three genres of traditional Balinese dance.
Art and architecture.
Indonesian arts include both age-old art forms developed through centuries and a recently developed contemporary art. Despite often displaying local ingenuity, Indonesian arts have absorbed foreign influences, most notably from India, the Arab world, China and Europe, as a result of contacts and interactions facilitated, and often motivated, by trade. Painting is an established and developed art in Bali, where its people are famed for their art history. Their painting tradition started as classical Khamis Norwayang-style visual narrative, derived from visual art discovered on candy bars reliefs in eastern Java. There have been numerous discoveries of megalithic sculptures in Indonesia. Subsequently, tribal art has flourished within the culture of Nias, Batak, Asmat, Dayak, and Tra. Wood and stone are common materials used as the media for sculpting among these tribes. Between the 8th and 15th centuries, the Javanese civilization has developed a refined stone sculpting art and architecture which was influenced by Hindu-Buddhist Dharmic civilization. The temples of Borobudur and Prambanan are among the most famous examples of the practice. As with the arts, Indonesian architecture has absorbed foreign influences that have brought cultural changes and profound effect on building styles and techniques. The most dominant has traditionally been Indian. However, Chinese, Arab, and European influences have also been significant. Traditional carpentry, masonry, stone and woodwork techniques and decorations have thrived in vernacular architecture, with numbers of traditional houses Rumah Adat styles that have been developed. The traditional houses and settlements in the country vary by ethnic groups, and each has a specific custom and history. Examples include Tras Tongkanan, Minang Kabaus Rumah Gadang and Rangkiang, Javanese-style Pendopo Pavilion with Joglo-style roof, Dayaks longhouses, various Malay houses, Balinese houses and temples, and also different forms of rice barns lumbung.
Music, dance and clothing.
The music of Indonesia predates historical records. Various indigenous tribes incorporate chants and songs accompanied by musical instruments in their rituals. Angklung, Kakapi Suling, Gong, Gamelan, Tailmpong, Kulintang, and Sasando are examples of traditional Indonesian instruments. The diverse world of Indonesian music genres is the result of the musical creativity of its people, and subsequent cultural encounters with foreign influences. These include gambas and qasidah from the Middle East, keroncong from Portugal, and dangdut, one of the most popular music genres in Indonesia, with notable Hindi influence as well as Malay orchestras. Today, the Indonesian music industry enjoys both nationwide and regional popularity in Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei, due to common culture and intelligible languages between Indonesian and Malay. Indonesian dances have a diverse history, with more than 3,000 original dances. Scholars believe that they had their beginning in rituals and religious worship. Examples include war dances, a dance of witch doctors, and dance to call for rain or any agricultural rituals such as Hudok. Indonesian dances derive its influences from the archipelago's prehistoric and tribal, Hindu-Buddhist, and Islamic periods. Recently, modern dances and urban teen dances have gained popularity due to the influence of Western culture. as well as those of Japan and South Korea to some extent. Traditional dances, however, such as the Javanese, Sundanese, Manan, Balinese, Saman continue to be a living and dynamic tradition. Indonesia has various styles of clothing as a result of its long and rich cultural history. The national costume has its origins in the indigenous culture of the country and traditional textile traditions. The Javanese batik and kebaya are arguably Indonesia's most recognized national costume, though they have Sundanese and Balinese origins as well. Each province has a representation of traditional attire and dress. Other forms of local drama include the Javanese luduk and kitaparak, the Sundanese sandiwara, Bitor Ilenon, and various Balinese dance drama. They incorporate humor and jest and often involve audiences in their performances. Some theater traditions also include music, dancing and the silat martial arts such as Randai from Minangkabau people of West Sumatra. It is usually performed for traditional ceremonies and festivals, and based on semi-historical Minangkabau legends and love story. The first film produced in the archipelago was Lo Itang Kazaroing. The latter part of the Sukarno era saw the use of cinema for nationalistic, anti-Western purposes, and foreign films were subsequently banned, while the new order utilized a censorship code that aimed to maintain social order. Production of films peaked during the 1980s, although it declined significantly in the next decade. Notable films in this period include Pengabdi Setan 1980, Nagabana 1987, Joitan Jadian 1988, Kititan Sea Boy 1989, and Warkop's comedy films. Independent filmmaking was a rebirth of the film industry since 1998, where films started addressing previously banned topics, such as religion, race, and love. Riri Raizu and Myra Lesmane were among the new generation of filmmakers who co-directed Kultsak 1999, Pechalangan Sharina 2000, Edo Apa Dengan Sinta 2002, and Las Kapilangi 2008. In 2016, Warkop DKI Reborn, Jang Krik Boss Part 1 smashed box office records, becoming the most watched Indonesian film with 6.8 million tickets sold. Indonesia has held annual film festivals and awards, including the Indonesian Film Festival Film Indonesia that has been held intermittently since 1955. It hands out the Citru Award, the film industry's most prestigious award. From 1973 to 1992, the festival was held annually and then discontinued until its revival in 2004.
Mass media and literature.
Media freedom increased considerably after the fall of the new order, during which the Ministry of Information monitored and controlled domestic media and restricted foreign media. The television market includes several national commercial networks and provincial networks that compete with public TVRI, which held a monopoly on TV broadcasting from 1962 to 1989. By the early 21st century, the improved communications system had brought television signals to every village and people can choose from up to 11 channels. Private radio stations carry news bulletins while foreign broadcasters supply programs. The number of printed publications has increased significantly since 1998. The country had 171 million internet users in 2018, with a penetration rate that keeps increasing annually. Most are between the ages of 15 and 19 and depend primarily on mobile phones for access, outnumbering both laptops and computers. The oldest evidence of writing in the Indonesian archipelago is a series of Sanskrit inscriptions dated to the 5th century. Many of Indonesia's peoples have firmly rooted oral traditions, which help to define and preserve their cultural identities. In written poetry and prose, several traditional forms dominate, mainly se, pantun, garindam, hikayat and babad. Examples of these forms include Serabdul Mulyuk, Hikayat Hang Tuah, Sulalatius Salatin, and Babad Tanajoy. Early modern Indonesian literature originates in Sumatran tradition. Literature and poetry flourished during the decades leading up to and after independence. Balai Pustaka, The Government Bureau for Popular Literature was instituted in 1917 to promote the development of indigenous literature. Many scholars consider the 1950s and 1960s to be the golden age of Indonesian literature. The style and characteristics of modern Indonesian literature vary according to the dynamics of the country's political and social landscape. Notable literary figures of the modern era include Multatuli, Chairul Anwar, Muhammad Yamin, Merari Siaga, Mara Rosli, Pramejan Anantatoa, and Ayu Utami.
Cuisine.
Indonesian cuisine is one of the most diverse, vibrant, and colorful in the world, full of intense flavor. Many regional cuisines exist, often based upon indigenous culture and foreign influences such as Chinese, European, Middle Eastern, and Indian precedents. Rice is the leading staple food and is served with side dishes of meat and vegetables. Spices, notably chili, coconut milk, fish and chicken, are fundamental ingredients. Some popular dishes such as nasi goreng, gado-gado, sate, and soto are prevalent and considered as national dishes. The Ministry of Tourism, however, chose tumpeng as the official national dish in 2014, describing it as binding the diversity of various culinary traditions. Other popular dishes include rendang, one of the many Padang cuisines, along with dendeng and gulai. In 2017, rendang was chosen as the world's most delicious food by the CNN Travel Reader's Choice. Another fermented food is oncom, similar in some ways to tempeh but uses a variety of bases, not only soy, created by different fungi, and particularly popular in West Java.
Sports.
Sports are generally male-oriented, and spectators are often associated with illegal gambling. Badminton and football are the most popular sports. Indonesia is among the only 5 countries that have won the Thomas and Uber Cup, the World Team Championship of men's and women's badminton, along with weightlifting. It is the sport that contributes the most to Indonesia's Olympic medal tally. Liga 1 is the country's premier football club league. On the international stage, Indonesia has experienced limited success despite being the first Asian team to participate in the FIFA World Cup in 1938 as Dutch East Indies. On the continental level, Indonesia won the bronze medal in the 1958 Asian Games. Indonesia's first appearance in the AFC Asian Cup was in 1996 and successfully qualified for the next 3 tournaments. They, however, failed to progress through the next stage in all occasions. Other popular sports include boxing and basketball, which has a long history in Indonesia and was part of the first national games Pekan Olahraga Nasional, PON, in 1948. Some of the famous Indonesian boxers include Elias Pikal, 3 times IBF Super Flyweight champion, Nico Thomas, Muhammad Rachman, and Chris John. In motorsport, Rio Haryanto became the first Indonesian to compete in Formula 1 in 2016. Sepak takraw and Karapan sapi bull racing in Madura are some examples of traditional sports in Indonesia. In areas with a history of tribal warfare, mock fighting contests are held, such as Kasi in Flores and Pasola in Sumba. Pencaksilat is an Indonesian martial art and in 1987, became one of the sporting events in the Southeast Asian Games, with Indonesia appearing as one of the leading competitors. In Southeast Asia, Indonesia is one of the top sports powerhouses by winning the Southeast Asian Games 10 times since 1977, most recently in 2011,